Good morning, actually, good afternoon, and welcome to this episode of Cisilion Live. My name is Rob Quickenden. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Cisilion, and I'm joined today by Jack Lewis from Microsoft. So give us a wave, Jack.
Good afternoon, everybody, even.
So we're here today to talk about some of the key announcements that were made during Microsoft's Ignite session, which I'm really looking forward to. Far too many to cover all in one go. But Jack, before we kick off, do you just want to give a quick overview to our listeners to what Ignite is and why it's so important for Microsoft and for their customers and partners?
Sure, absolutely. So Microsoft Ignite is our annual technology conference, and typically it's run in person, but obviously given the current climate, it has been run remotely over the last week. And it's where we make the majority of our announcements around the kind of tech that we're going to be releasing over the next year and beyond. So a lot of technologists all over the world really look forward to it as the conference that they want to attend from a Microsoft perspective. Of course, we run other conferences as well, but this is the big one from a technology perspective.
Thanks, Jack. And so before we kick off, actually, I've got a quick quiz for everybody. So in fact, we have managed to rough around the virtual cupboards and find a prize for this as well. So I'd like anyone listening to stick into the chat window, the comment window. How many announcements do you think there were at Ignite this year from Microsoft? Major announcements across all of the platforms. And what we'll do, whoever gets closest to the answer, it's a bit like guessing the number of marbles in a jar, we'll announce at our next event and you'll get a prize in the post to your home. So vote away. While you're doing that, I'd like to actually just announce the winners from last week's event. So we had some top of the range headsets to give away, certified of course, and pleased to announce that the winners of those, so if you're on the call, give us a wave. If not, we will contact you of course by email, but the winners for that are the Princess Alexandra NHS Hospital, so congratulations, the Reitlington Wigan Lee NHS Teaching Trust, Bird & Bird, one of our long-term customers, and MS Amlin. So there'll be headsets on their way. You can argue who they go to. Thank you very much. Right, so on to Ignite then. So we're going to cover as quick as we can. We've got about half an hour to cover some of the key areas of announcements. We're going to start with Microsoft Teams because you really can't talk about anything Microsoft without talking about Microsoft Teams. It is the number one platform, and of course has been a major part of most people's lives through the COVID pandemic. We're then going to talk about some of the announcements to Microsoft's Power Platform. And for those that don't know what Power Platform is, we'll give you a very quick 10,000-foot view of what that is. We'll talk about some of the announcements around security and compliance. Again, something very relevant in today's hybrid home working world. We'll end with Azure. And some of the announcements around Azure, again, there were far too many to cover them all. We're just going to pick up the favorites, and then we'll do a quick wrap up at the end. So Microsoft Teams. I don't think we need to introduce what Teams is. I think it's probably fair to say everybody on this webinar has probably used Teams, even if they don't use it within the organization. They've certainly would have joined some Teams. And of course, you know, a lot of people know Microsoft Teams for meetings, for chat and IM and calling, but of course Teams is far more than that. You know, Teams is as Microsoft say, the hub for teamwork. It brings together calling, files, automation, productivity, chat, voice. You know, as you know, Jack, we do a lot in the voice space around Microsoft Teams, and it's probably fair to say that anyone that's been using Teams for a while, Teams looks very different to what it did at the start of the pandemic, with just the massive raft of features that have been rolling out over the past few months. So to add to that, what are your favorites that kind of got announced in the last couple of days?
Yeah, there's been so many announcements for Microsoft Teams. I think the first one probably I'd like to call out is Breakout Rooms, which are set to be released soon. This is certainly massive for myself and some of my colleagues here within Microsoft internally as well. we run a lot of hacks. They have partners attending, and the way that we'll use this is we will invite multiple partners into those hacks. So we'll run an initial Teams meeting, and then we'll be able to use the breakout rooms to separate the partners into their own meeting spaces. And I'm sure customers, educational customers as well, a big use case there. I'm sure you've seen customers asking for these types of features. So very excited about that one. Again, expanding our already hugely capable meeting capabilities within Microsoft Teams with another great feature there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably does jump out as one of the biggest, I think, and I think you're right. You know, so many organisations now are running, whether it's all hands with their teams, whether it is, you know, reaching out to their customers, whether it is running events. And I know many of our customers run their own webinars. Many of my customers have you know, teaching associations, or they do adult learning, or they just have, you know, an education part of their technical division where they train. And I mean, and we've been doing breakout rooms in Teams for quite a while, but it's been quite a manual, coordinated process. And of course, what Rooms does within Teams is just make, you know, click of a button, multiple rooms. You can assign people dynamically, or, you know, alphabetically, or however you want it. And of course, the great thing is it's really simple to bring them back into that room at the end, and then kind of collaborate. So I think you're right. I think, you know, I've seen it rolling out into some of our customers already in preview, and yeah, should be here next month. So
yeah, it's so slick. We've had it for a month or two here within Microsoft. Go on, sorry, Rob.
No, not at all. No, I think please share, because that'd be good to see some real life experience.
Yeah, I was going to say we've had it for a month or two here internally within Microsoft. Haven't used it loads because we haven't run any hacks in that time. But yeah, it's super slick. Used it a little bit. The integration just looks so good, and it just works. It's fantastic, mate. So that was a big one. I think the other one that we wanted to call out as well was custom meeting layouts, aka dynamic views. I know you were excited about this one, Rob.
Very much. I think it's one of the things, more and more time in meetings, and probably like yourself, I get, you know, my ability to see my customers. And I think, as you know, I'm a real advocate for video. Anyone that knows me knows how frustrated I get if people. I think within video calls, and I think one of the things that has been great is some of the announcements that have been made to kind of make that experience a lot better. There have been a lot of studies that have been done around how people interact, and with the kind of grid view, and everyone's been talking about the 49 video grid view that Zoom had, that Teams now has. I don't know about you, but that just does me in. Looking at a window of 49 different people moving around and talking is just really hard. So I know some of the things around the dynamic views and things that have been produced, where, you know, you pull almost in an auditorium, so it's like you're looking out at an audience, which is a much more realistic approach for how we collaborate, particularly in an education environment. You know, we're used to teaching groups of students. It makes sense that they're sitting in front of us in a classroom environment or in a meeting room environment. But I think the other things I think that are going to be really great is that custom view. Sometimes within Teams, you do want to see 2 people or 3 people that are kind of your key speakers. You also want to see some content, and so the ability to have very simple layouts and be able to switch those around is great. And actually, the other thing I think which is fantastic is kind of what I refer to as the Newsroom View, where you'll be able to have content on screen. So be that a presentation or a whiteboard, and then your presenters will actually be able to be in front of that presentation. So think of it like the newsroom when you're projecting the weather. And I think that's going to make such a massive difference for how conferences and events get produced. You know, we've already seen, you know, with whatever this second wave is going to become, most of the leading, you know, global events that are scheduled each year are already going to be virtual next year. That's not a question. That's already dictated. Microsoft, I know all of your big conferences next year will be virtual. So I think another big thing. And I think to wrap onto that as well, I think is templates for Teams, right? So I think everyone's creating more teams. Yes, there's lots of conversations around governance and how we control access to Teams and security and all those kind of things, but actually just getting people up and running really quickly in Teams it is really important. And I think the template feature for Teams, which is actually, according to Microsoft, is released now. So if it's not in your tenant, it will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. It Microsoft do release these things in waves, and that's really important as well. So I think there's something, I think it's 8 or 10 custom templates out of the box for various different roles, whether it's projects, whether it's events, whether it's campaigns, whether it's health, and then of course your IT admins can create their own. So that's another great one. And I think another one that I'll touch on, and Jack, I know you're quite passionate about this one, is the new enhancements coming to Teams and of course therefore eventually into live events around the registration and reporting for events.
Yeah, this is huge, I think. So myself and my colleagues here within Microsoft run a lot of live events, and what we're planning on releasing into Microsoft Teams live events is the ability for you to manage that registration process. Also, it will send attendee emails, so you'll be able to automate that process as well via Teams. And then there's going to be some reporting capabilities, which a lot of customers and partners have been asking us for. And I think it's just going to enhance the already great capabilities that are available within Teams live events. I think that's fantastic, particularly the registration page. That'll be, hugely useful. I know for yourself, Rob, as well, in your events team.
Yeah, I think it just brings it together. I think it's most organisations have got a product that they use for these things, or they've got a team of people that look after that process for registration. But I think bringing it together in one place, if you're using Teams as the foundation for your meetings, it absolutely makes sense. So I mean, for me, they're kind of some of the big things. There are some other things announced around calling. So there's some changes coming to the layout of the way that calls are displayed if you're using voice within Teams, so the ability to easily transfer calls into call queues and make it a little bit more visual within the Teams, the main Teams app within the desktop. And I think the other thing that is actually I'm really excited about, and I know certainly a lot of people that work in HR will be excited about, is around the well-being services that are coming into Teams. And I'm a big fan of Microsoft Analytics and Workplace Analytics, and I find the suggestions of just kind of how I'm kind of working. I kind of it's like the Fitbit view, if you like, for Office 365 of how I work and how much time you've got. And I'm sure you're all familiar with those kind of tips and suggestions that come in, but that's now coming into Teams directly, and and in combination of that, Microsoft have partnered with Headspace. So I'm sure many of you know Headspace. If you've got health insurance, you'll probably find you have access or a discounted subscription to Headspace. But really great social well-being, meditation, training, coaching application. And that's coming into Teams. The details around how that's going to come into Teams and where the subscriptions are based and do you pay for it, and those things are still a little bit sketchy. But that's going to be really great to actually understand and to provide those analytics across your teams, not just to you as an individual, around how your teams are working. Do they feel fatigued? Are people in back-to-back Teams meetings all day, working till 6:30 every night? I think we all know that most of us, if we're lucky enough to still have jobs through COVID, are really burning the midnight oil. It's a lot harder to differentiate, what home life and what work life is. And that's a challenge for everybody. And I think the fact that Microsoft is recognizing this and bringing those analytics in to help manage your people's well-being. After all, our people, for me, my staff are our company, and it's really important that we look after those. So yeah, definitely something I'm passionate about. And if you've not seen that, definitely check out the Ignite announcements on that.
Yeah, so there was some quite scary stats actually called out in Jared Spatero's session, Future of Work. It's only a short session. I think it's only 22 minutes. Don't quote me on that though. But I think it's definitely one of those that I would call out as worth watching alongside Satya's keynote as well. I think Satya's keynote is relevant to anybody who works in any organization, because he talks about technologies that we are creating being used to solve real business problems, and then talks a little bit about culture and some of the challenges that exist in today's world. So I think those two sessions, regardless of whether you're a technologist or not, I know it's a technology conference, I'd recommend that you watch those for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And before we move outside of Teams, I had another couple of things I just wanted to highlight really that I think are some of the sessions just made me realise actually some of the other innovation that goes on across the rest of Office 365. And I wanted just to call a couple of the highlights out. I think for people just to, if you've got half an hour over lunch to go and have a play with. Because Office 365, a lot of people think of Office 365 as, oh, that's just a bunch of apps in the cloud. It's not really anything else. And of course, the Office applications or Office apps for enterprise, as they're now called, have always been the pillar point of Office and what everyone's used forever. Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And there are some really cool things actually that have been announced over the last couple of months. They're not new to Ignite, but I think I just wanted to touch on a couple of them because I'm quite passionate about some of these. A lot of people refer to these in Microsoft as daily delighters, and I think some of these are really great. So I'm just going to pick on a couple of them, and Jack, feel free to jump in. So the first one I wanted to shout about is PowerPoint, right? So everyone loves PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint and those kind of things. But there's some really cool stuff in PowerPoint if you've not used PowerPoint or some of the advanced features. My favorite has to be the presenter coach within PowerPoint. It's so good. If you've got a big presentation to prepare, you know what it's like. You need to demo it. You need to do a rehearsal. You need to practice it. To do that and get feedback, you need other people. Not anymore. So PowerPoint Coach, which is I think available now on the desktop level. It's available in mobile on preview, I noticed yesterday, and it's been available on the web version of PowerPoint for a while. It will basically coach you through your session, so you can do a live presentation in rehearsal mode. The coach will analyze in real time whether you're reading your slides, whether you're saying and whether you're using profound language, whether the wording you're using is not accessibility correct, whether it's racist, whether it's sexist, whether it's anything that it probably shouldn't be to deliver a presentation. And it gives you a guide on how you're moving your hands, the pace you're talking. Absolutely fantastic piece of technology. The other piece, of course, is PowerPoint Designer, which many of you have probably used to make your slides a bit more whizzy and quick, and amazing what you can put together in an hour. I quite often watch the YouTube videos on Microsoft Education where they show 4 or 5-year-olds putting together more professional PowerPoint presentations than I see most FTSE 100 companies pull together. So again, a really great thing.
Definitely. I am very creatively challenged, so this PowerPoint Designer is used to create all of my slides, all of them.
The other one I wanted to pull out, which I only discovered the other day actually, was the new Transcribed feature in Word. Now this is only available in Word Online. It's not yet in the Word desktop apps or mobile apps, but that's incredible as well. So if you're ever in a situation where you make your own notes, so I do quite a lot of that. I'll just record some audio while I'm thinking about something, or if you're doing interviews, or you just generally want to have a chat with someone in a meeting and it's not a formal meeting and you want to record it, you can take that recording and you can import it directly into Word Online. It of course stores that in OneDrive, analyzes it, and it transcribes it, and it can recognize several different speakers based on their voice and tone. I actually tried to trick it yesterday when I was testing it, otherwise I would have shown it with 2 different voices. It was probably quite amusing listening to me doing it, but it knew it was me, so it kind of failed. But it will actually completely transcribe, and it was about, I'd say it was well over 95% accurate, which I would expect, because if any of you use live translation within Microsoft Teams, then you'll know how accurate that is. So again, something I'd definitely encourage people have a look at. Excel, the import a picture into a spreadsheet is fantastic. When that feature first came out, I was literally trying to find things in newspapers and things that I could take a picture of on my phone and import, and it does that with extreme accuracy. You can even draw out a table of things and write handwritten words in, take a picture of it, and it will import it into Excel as an Excel spreadsheet. Really, really powerful.
Hey, did you see that in Satya's session we called out that from an AI perspective we've now hit human parity for image captioning as well, which is great from an accessibility perspective. I know some of the Office 365 accessibility features automatically apply things like alt text, so that's amazing.
It's really clever. And I think we're due a session on AI actually, because AI is a very topical conversation. I know there'll be lots of people listening that have got, they're either excited, concerned, a bit of both about what AI means in the future and just how fast it's coming on. I think the other thing before we move on is to touch on, I know this is something that you're extremely passionate about, is the new Edge browser. Microsoft's had a bit of a slating for years over Internet Explorer, and then the Edge that came within Windows 10. Do you want to just briefly touch on New Edge?
Yeah, so New Edge was released probably over a year ago now, and it uses the Chromium engine to render pages. So the same engine that Google Chrome uses, which means it's highly compatible, very efficient, super quick. It's also very easy for you to manage that using your existing Microsoft tools, such as Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is all good news. But what I love about this, and I use this literally on a daily basis, so I have the New Edge installed onto my machine. All of our content within Microsoft is either stored in OneDrive or SharePoint. We use Microsoft Search and we use Bing together. And even in a massive organization like Microsoft, I have no problem finding the latest and greatest collateral. So if I want to find the latest presentation deck on some new Teams feature, I do a quick search in Bing and it brings back the work results based on what it's found within SharePoint Online or somebody's OneDrive if I have access to that, so if they've shared it. And I just think it's an incredible productivity story that customers could really benefit from by deploying New Edge, turning on Microsoft Search, getting their content into Office 365. And I think it's just a great story. I don't know how people at Microsoft survived before this technology existed. It must have been a real nightmare trying to find latest and greatest content and collateral. But I just don't suffer with that problem, to be honest with you.
And for those that don't know, Bing is a search engine. Just but I think my view of it when I explain it is it kind of brings together everything that Delve was as a standalone product, where you could kind of surface and search for content, and of course the best of the web. And of course, it is
utilizing our investment in Microsoft Graph. So Graph behind the scenes creates, I guess, maps. You could probably call them. There's a mapping or a graph that represents you as an individual, your organization, and then of course world graphs, which we use to help better protect our customers from attacks and other things as well.
I think one of the great examples there is the ability just to be able to be in the search and type in sales presentation from Craig, for example, and it will it understands the context of that and will find the recording of the last sales presentation that Craig did that's stored in Stream and surface that for you. And that's actually really hard to do normally without emailing people and asking them to kind of send you a link back. So on that point, we've kind of covered a lot of the Microsoft 365 stuff, which is always kind of a focal point. The other one, the next point we're going to move on to is Power Platform. So I'm conscious of time. So Jack, for those that don't know Power Platform, do you want to give a quick 10,000 foot? What is Power Platform and why is it such an exciting area?
Yeah, super exciting. So I've done so much around Power Platform since joining Microsoft. I did a little bit before I joined, but I've done so much since joining just because you get exposed to it more and more. What Power Platform is, it's a product grouping terminology. So it's a set of products, technologies, tools that allow you to, as a non-professional developer, so we call them citizen developers, they can either have some professional development experience, loads of professional development experience, or no professional development experience whatsoever. They can create applications, so business applications. They can create automated workflows. They can create virtual agents, so bots that can then kick off automated workflows. Or you can create reports and dashboards that allow you to draw insights from data that exists in your organization. And there were some incredible announcements that we made at Inspire, which was our last conference that we ran, which was, of course, the partner conference. But then we built on top of those announcements at Ignite by announcing that you are going to be able to build Power Apps, virtual agents, or Power Automate flows within Teams, which aligns to our Project Oakdale announcement, which is essentially a relational database that will be seeded with the Office 365 license, which solves a big challenge around where do you store that business data if you don't have a relational database. It needs to be an appropriate place to put it. The other great thing that we announced was that for professional developers, we're continuing to enhance the Power Platform experience. So we've got some GitHub integrations coming. which is incredible. But also the one that I really love was we have announced an Azure API Management connector, which means if your organization has built a line of business app, the developers that have built that can actually create a connector via Azure Management APIs, Azure API Management, and allow those citizen developers in your organization, so the subject matter experts that are the boots on the ground doing the jobs, doing the tasks day in, day out, to actually access that data that exists within your line of business app. So if that's stored in a SQL database somewhere, it doesn't matter. You would expose access to that data using Azure API Management, create a connector, and that again is seeded with the Teams license, the Office 365 license. So no additional cost potentially has to come into play there, where you don't have to go and buy a Power Apps license. You should be able to do what you need to do within the boundaries of what you get from a Power Apps perspective within that Office 365 license.
And I think that's a really big point, because I think it's licensing in Microsoft is always going to be complicated,
of course,
but it's made it a lot simpler for organizations that want to develop their own apps and expose them internally within Teams without having to worry about those per app licenses and do I need a license for that and those things. So it will make that licensing a lot simpler. I mean, certainly one of the questions we get asked a lot, and we've started doing a lot now in Power Platform with a number of our customers, particularly actually around the NHS, around automating processes, and whether that's flu vaccinations and upcoming COVID work. Watch this space for a really interesting case study we're working on. But I think, a lot of customers say to us, that's great, I get the idea of it, where do I start? And I think I'm just very quickly going to introduce, and we've run a session on Power Platforms already in the past, and perhaps we'll reshare the link to that for those that missed it. But what we've built is a whole set of very simple quick start services, which just help organizations get a view of really, what is the potential of the Power Platform. So we call that the hack. I think, Jack, you talked about that earlier on, where we bring a whole bunch of people into a virtual room. It's great now that we'll be able to use breakout rooms, of course, to break those into different segments. And the idea is just to give a bit of the art of the possible, and then get people to sort of go away and think about areas of their business that they would like to improve through business process automation, which is really what the Power Platform delivers. And then what we've done on the back of that is built a set of kind of quick start packages, really. So whether it's virtual agents that you want to create, so aka chatbots across the organization, whether that's around some simple approval processes, whether there's actually an app that you want to build, whether it's a sales facing app, whether it's an expense app, whether it's an app for tracking inventory or anything it might be, or even for tracking return to work and free desks and how people work. We've built a couple of quick starters that just are designed to not do the full app or the full service, but to get you something that's a live proof of concept that you can use across the organization to start off. And I think that they've been really, we've been overwhelmed actually by the number of our customers taking those up. And I know with some of the upcoming Cloud Accelerator workshops that I'll touch on very quickly at the end, Power Platforms is about to be released as a cloud workshop as well.
Yeah. And I think that'll really help customers as well. I think the dream scenario is that if you run one of those hacks and your customers, cities and developers have created a really useful app, a really useful automation workflow maybe that sits behind that app, get that app into Teams, because if that's the hub for teamwork, if they're consuming that app in Teams, then they can also do other collaborative things, host meetings. I think that's the dream experience there, and that's what Project Oakdale, which of course we announced originally at Inspire, will allow app developers to do, or those citizen developers to do with Power Platform. There was also a new Power BI app announced as well for Teams, which I'm very excited about.
There was. So just quickly for everyone listening, so we're probably about 12-13 minutes overrunning because there's just so much to cover and we're getting a bit carried away, as you can tell. So hopefully you can bear with us and stay with us for another 10 or so minutes, and we'll try and run through some of the key points. And we've had some questions in the chat window actually as well, which about things like Windows Virtual Desktop, which we'll come on to a little bit later. So I was going to move on and just talk about some of the announcements around security and compliance. And of course, security and compliance is not something that Microsoft generally talks about as a dedicated context. So, I think it's fair to say, and welcome to the arguments on this might call, Microsoft is the biggest security company in the world, right? And I remember years ago when I did development work, and worked in networking and things, that Microsoft and security were two words that never went together, right? It was always, Microsoft was the reason that you had a job in security, because it was so full of holes. And of course, that's changed, dramatically. I mean, Microsoft are top right Gartner Magic Quadrant leader, I think, in 6 areas now across security and compliance, and more being announced in the next couple of months. And it's been incredible to see what Microsoft done in that space. There was a couple of really key points, I think, that came out. The first one is kind of more, I think, at the first point about a branding exercise, but it is a bit more than that. So Microsoft have rebranded the majority of their previous advanced threat protection services, so Office ATP, Azure ATP, for example, into Defender. So Microsoft 365 Defender is now the name that really covers all of those components. We've got a blog on this, actually, again, which we'll share, which goes into some of those naming details that have changed. But what they've then done is really kind of brought these things together and provided really deep integration between Microsoft Defender, which is all the old ATP products that you knew and loved, what they've done with Azure Security Center, and of course how that binds together into Azure Sentinel, which of course can combine not just the signals from Azure and all the services across 365, but of course any product, any vendor, any piece of hardware that you're using. It is Microsoft's cloud. I think it is still the first cloud SIEM product out there, and some really big announcements. And if you're into that, if you run a SOC, if you're responsible for security, definitely go and check out the announcements around that. I think the next one, which Jack, I'll let you comment on, is the endpoint management side of things, and some of the big announcements there, particularly around Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yeah, so probably a couple to call out here. This used to be a set of technologies that I was really closely aligned to. I don't do as much now in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager and security space as I used to. But it was announced that Windows Virtual Desktop and VDI management, so VDI hosted outside of Windows Virtual Desktop, will be supported by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is fantastic. They're also announced expanded macOS management support, and I know that from my time spent speaking to customers about this a few years ago, that was a bit of a problem. You almost certainly had to purchase third-party products to manage macOS devices if you wanted to do anything significant with them, and then maybe integrate that with Microsoft Endpoint Manager Suite. So there's an announcement to say that we're going to do some more stuff in that space, which is great. There was also Microsoft Tunnel announced, which I thought was really interesting as well in this space, which from what we've announced is going to allow iOS and Android devices to tunnel back into the corporate network, which, again, from my time spent working in this space previously, was always a challenge. If you run across a specific customer scenario or a requirement that said, we've got to take our iOS devices and we've got to use some sort of VPN technology to get them back into the network, in the past, that provided quite a broken experience a lot of the time, even if it was delivered via proxies. So I'm really interested to see how we're actually going to deliver this and what the experience looks like. I'm sure we'll get it right. They've spent a lot of time trying to work out, the details of how this is going to be delivered. So that's really exciting, I think. Again, some more great announcements. Just on the Microsoft Defender piece, I just wanted to call out that back in the days when we first announced that Microsoft 365 was coming together to bring together Office 365, Windows 10, and our security products and identity products as well, which was EMS back in the day, Enterprise Mobility and Security. That was primarily a branding exercise, if you remember. But look at what happened behind the scenes. They aligned a lot of the engineering teams to report under the same management, and as a result, the graph came about and all the incredible things that you can now do between the product integration. So I think it might primarily look on the surface like just a branding exercise, but I would suggest that probably when we have this conversation again in 2 years' time, Rob, there'll be some incredible integrations between a lot of our Microsoft Protect, Detect, Respond products that were currently maybe segregated in the past, but now they're going to start to maybe talk to each other a bit more and start to share some more insights, which I think is fantastic. I know the other thing that you was really excited about as well was Microsoft 365 Lighthouse.
I was I was, yeah. So Microsoft released Azure Lighthouse a little while ago, and this is really something that's probably more important for partners such as ourselves, as it gives us a much better way to securely manage multiple customers' Azure environments that we do. And Microsoft announced kind of a little bit quietly, I think, Microsoft 365 Lighthouse, which again gives service providers, managed service providers, the ability to better manage multiple customers through what they call Lighthouse, so sort of secure pane of glass for better management, which makes it a little bit easier than kind of delegate admin roles and all these kind of things that happen today. So again, really good. I think the final point on Defender that I think you missed actually was, which is fantastic, is Microsoft now has complete endpoint coverage. So from Linux to Windows, Mac, Android went into general availability, and they announced the public preview finally with the back of the updates to iOS 14, which of course have opened up the API stacks a lot more finally, that Defender is also coming to iOS. It also means that you can do things like change your default mail client in iOS to Outlook. Yay, something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Right, so I think we've kind of covered most of the security stuff. There is obviously a lot more. That kind of pulls, I think. Oh no, one more thing I think on that. It's kind of is Azure really, I guess, rather than it is security. But Azure App Proxy. I think this calls for the death of the VPN.
Finally. Yeah.
Machine, right? For those who don't know, Azure App Proxy is a way to secure and expose on-premise applications via Azure, with all the benefits of Azure AD, such as MFA and single sign-on and conditional access and all those kind of things that you need to do secure applications without the need for these kind of cumbersome VPNs to access certain things and investing loads of money in VPN concentrators and clients and all these things that just generally slow things down. And there was a number of big announcements, which we don't have time to go into today, around the enhancements to that to make even better support for legacy applications within environments. And again, the pressure might sort of clearly had on that. I mean, I know from the customers we work with that their entire workforce is remote, and the biggest restrictions they have on how people work is accessing those legacy applications. And whilst the argument is, will you migrate them? That's not an easy job. And I think that's massive news, I think.
Yeah, I think a mixture of that and maybe some Windows virtual desktop stuff can maybe help customers move away from having to rely on a VPN, which is fantastic news.
And I think on the Windows virtual desktop side as well, which is another one that we almost should give its own topic, you've now also got to have the ability, I think it's in preview now, of actually mounting on-premise resources, even file shares and file resources, into a virtual desktop that's hosted in Azure. So you can actually bind those on-premise resources to a cloud virtual machine in Azure and expose that to the user. And part of that is using that new App Proxy technology. So again, if you're into Windows Virtual Desktop, really exciting times. Azure then. The world's computer, as Microsoft call it. Again, lots of things announced in Azure. We've not got time to cover probably hardly any of them today.
So many announcements.
Number one, I think that again was, I think, quietly announced, but is really important and probably links back to everything we've talked about Teams, was the new Azure Communication Services. So, Jack, I know this is one of your faves. So, do you want to introduce that one?
Yeah, sure is. So, I spend a lot of my time talking to partners about how they can build Teams apps and integrations. And one of the questions that I get a lot from certain partners is, can we take Teams meetings and actually just stick that in our apps? Can we iframe the experience? And the answer has always been, no, you can't. But Azure Communication Services potentially changes that, because it's a platform as a service offering that allows developers to use the Teams backend components. So the same infrastructure that we use for meetings, callings, chats, etc., within your own application. So you can embed those experiences into your app. Now that's been announced into public preview, and right now there isn't any Teams integrations, but we did announce that shortly the Teams integrations will be available. If you're a developer and you're thinking about wanting to provide video chat, such as normal chat experiences, PSTN calling, SMS within your own applications, then really I'd highly encourage you to check out Azure Communication Services. Very exciting. I've been working on this with a number of partners in private preview for about the last 6 months. Feedback's been amazing. There's SDKs available now. There's sample applications. There's web components. Go out there and try them if you're a developer. It's incredible. I love this announcement.
Yeah, and it, like you say, it's massive, right? And I think it just shows, and again, it's in relation to COVID-19, right? You know, as more people need help with it, you know, people need help with applications. There's so much demand on businesses to build applications. Everyone's using applications remotely now. And you know what this basically means is anyone that's got an in-house custom application can add collaboration to it. They can add chat, SMS, video calling, whatever. And I think for Microsoft, what a clever play, right? If you're Microsoft, what a better way to say, here's the platform we use for Teams. We'll make it available to you and your customers for you to integrate into your own app. And I think, you know, what a powerful thing. I think, you know, they don't have to worry about how they build it. They don't have to worry about the security around it. You know that it's, you know, it's running in Microsoft, it's running in Azure. There's an API and SDK available. And in fact, I saw earlier in the week, actually, at one of the sessions that the Dynamics team at Microsoft are already using the preview of this to bring embedded video into their CRM and ERP platforms within it. So it's according to Microsoft, it's a couple of lines of code. What that actually will be, I'm not certain of, but again, I think massive. So I think final point I was going to touch on, and there were a lot for Azure. You know, in September, Gartner released their latest Gartner Magic Quadrant, and just kind of they should have waited a couple of weeks, I think, because a couple of the areas where Microsoft got a little bit, you know, a little bit beaten up over was things like availability zones and some of the failover resources. And Microsoft has always touted, you know, they've got more data center regions than the other cloud providers put together. You know, we've seen AWS and Google releasing more. But I think probably fair to say, I think Microsoft answered pretty much every criticism that the Gartner Quadrant released. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still in the top right quadrant, as are AWS and as are Google. But some of the big things for me, so some new regions got announced, you know, all again, zero carbon data centers, but there was a big push on increased resilience across availability zones. So they're releasing a load more new availability zones to allow seamless backup and DR across those. And I think with increased SLAs of 99.99%, which is really good. That 0.9 makes a massive difference to the previous ones. I think some of the other things I think that were great was the Azure Resource Mover that was announced. So this is really for organizations that care about data residency and need to move resources from one resource to another, whether that's due to local legislations or GDPR or whatever it might be. That was key. And I think the coolest thing actually was, although it's not a world first, was Azure Orbital, which is really a set of services that Microsoft have built, really aimed at satellite operators rather than the general consumer and enterprise. But to provide cloud connectivity for satellite providers in space. And I think, you know, that's just, you look at all the missions and the things going on at the moment around, you know, the reboot of space exploration. This is going to be massive. This is basically, you know, what AWS brought out with, I think it was called SatOps, I think it was called, that they released last year. Going to be massive. You know, what else? God, what else came out? Azure Hybrid Front. I think there was a load of new Azure Edge Stack services that were announced as well. So small portable devices, if you know Azure Stack, released a couple of years ago. You know, it's now really about bringing that edge computing to where data and analytics are needed. So whether that's farming and agriculture, whether that's manufacturing, whether it's retail, but providing, you know, laser fast compute, storage, networking, communications. Of course, you know, Microsoft acquired, I forget the name of them now, 5G technologies earlier in the year, to really make sure that data is processed, analyzed, and, you know, information presented back in real time, wherever people are, wherever that connectivity was. And I think that was that was absolutely huge as well. I don't know if you got anything to add to that. It was just my kind of quick list.
There's probably two things that we haven't mentioned. One of them was the first product to come out of Project Cortex, which we probably should have mentioned when we were talking about the additional Office 365 stuff. Yeah. So I would recommend that if you are interested in AI, go and check out Sharepoint Syntax. This is very exciting. Very quickly, what this will do is you train the models, and it will apply structured metadata tags to unstructured documents and data that resides within SharePoint, therefore increasing the ability for you to draw insights from, find it using search. You know, if you, again, the story, if you're using Edge, you've got Microsoft Search enabled, you've got these additional metadata tags are being applied to the information that resides within SharePoint, then this is going to provide some incredible productivity gains, I think. So that's really exciting. And then finally, this is the last thing that I'd probably mention, and I don't think we've got enough time to really talk about it, was the MS Cloud for Healthcare, so Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. And again,
go on, sorry, Rob.
No, go on, please.
I was going to say it's a cloud that's been built specifically for healthcare, so you could probably run a separate session on this, Rob, to be honest with you, another 40, 60 minutes.
We probably will. Fantastic. On the light of one more thing, because you have to have a one more thing at the end of these things. There was something announced yesterday, actually, which was not really directly related, but I think it's really key for any of you listening. Everybody uses LinkedIn. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, of course, and LinkedIn's not had a fresh lick of paint in about 5 years, as you know. Actually, it looks different this morning, I noticed when I went in, but they announced a massive overhaul of LinkedIn, bringing many more social features into LinkedIn. And the thing that jumped up for me, which I think is going to be fantastic for recruiters, for anybody engaging with their contacts through LinkedIn, is video interoperability. And no surprise, Teams will be the first one that they provide native integration into. And they've also announced integration support for two others, Zoom, which I guess makes sense for many, and BlueJeans as well, which is one that I didn't jump out at me as an obvious one. So that's coming. I think anyone that's got LinkedIn Premium subscriptions will be getting emails, if you not already have them, giving you access to a blog that tells you about some of those things. But I thought that was really interesting. So just to wrap up, and thank you so much for bearing with us and for everyone. I do hope the session was useful today. We have got a couple of blogs that we've written about some of the updates. There'll be a few more to follow on some of the other areas that we've not covered yet. We've covered one about security. We've covered one about Teams. Just very quickly. So Microsoft. So I would probably say any of you on this call would be entitled. So Microsoft have got a whole series of very generously funded workshops for cloud acceleration, which there's a list of kind of certified approved partners, of which we are one, that can deliver those on behalf of Microsoft. They're quite extensive. They vary anything from a day to 3 days, depending on the topic, covering everything from Teams in general to apps in Teams to calling to meetings. There's Power Platform ones out there, security, compliance, identity security, devices, almost anything you can think about in that Microsoft stack. There is a dedicated workshop for. Really well structured. Lots of time and investment have gone into those, and they're redesigned to just give you a real eye opener as to kind of what the tools can do. Demos, trial licensing, even in some cases, and the idea is to just walk everybody through how that works, talk about how you can embed it in the organization, and kind of work on a deployment plan. So if you're not familiar with those, speak to your account manager at Cisilion, speak to your Microsoft account manager, and certainly get some of those booked. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time on the 9th of October, where we're actually running a deep dive session around modern meeting room devices with Teams. And that will be co-hosted again by probably myself and Mo, who's the technical lead, looks after basically Teams room systems in the UK. So lots of good things, and we expect to have some good prizes to give away on that day as well. So definitely one signing up for. We'll stick the link at the bottom. So I think that's it from us. Jack, thank you so much for taking your time out and working with us. I know you work with other partners as well, so really appreciate that.
No, thank you for having me. Honestly, my pleasure. It's been brilliant. Thanks, Rob.
And for those listening, thank you. Welcome your comments and feedback either now or afterwards in LinkedIn. And if there's anything you need from us or any other further information you want that we can point you at, please do ask. Have a great afternoon. Have a great weekend. And see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.